Hello all, this is James Johnson, aka Sulfurblade, and I am here with some more Star Wars content. It is that time of the year, I suppose, where the latest Star Wars debacle is coming out sooner than later. And if you're like me, you're paying a lot of attention to the news around Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. And it just kind of infuriates you. It angers you. It makes you wonder why Disney seems to not care about us, the fans. Why Disney seems to have had all the time in the world to listen to what we've been telling them, but yet they've done nothing about it. So we know the entire script of Rise of the Skywalker at this point. We know it's going to basically be the worst Star Wars movie of all time. We know it's going to basically take away the chosen status from Anakin Skywalker, aka Darth Vader, who threw the Emperor down off of the Death Star, and the Death Star exploded shortly afterwards, and there's no way anyone could have lived through that. Or anything. I don't care how, if you were Yoda or what, there's no way you would live through that nuclear explosion type deal with when the Death Star went up. There is didn't happen. He's Palpatine's dead. There's no way he lived. Of course, the Palpatine that we saw die at the Death Star obviously must have been a clone, or that's going to be the quote unquote explanation. Or the Palpatine in this movie is a clone of the old Palpatine. Either way, clone technology happens somehow, and so Palpatine's back. Which, again, it destroys Star Wars. It completely destroys the redemption arc of Anakin Skywalker. It destroys the chosen arc of Anakin Skywalker. It destroys all the effort that Luke went through. It's just, yeah, Rise of Skywalker is... I give this movie a 0. This movie deserves a 0. If I was a teacher, I would give it back to Disney and say, you need to redo this. I'm not accepting this paper. You didn't follow the directions. You ignored the fans' directions, and you need to redo it. This is not an acceptable piece of work. That's how I grade Rise of Skywalker. It would get a 0 from me. I wouldn't even accept it to grade it. It would have to be redone. So the next worst movie on the list, Star Wars: The Last Jedi, where they basically destroyed Luke Skywalker, where they basically did not continue with the characters that they created in The Force Awakens, where we then discovered nothing about Stormtrooper guy, where Poe became Mr. Irrelevant white guy that needs to be pashed by powerful in charge women, where Admiral Akbar was completely forgotten about, and some other brand new Admiral Holda becomes the gallant savior of the Republic fleet after Admiral Akbar dies without any fanfare at all. Yeah, Star Wars: The Last Jedi is just filled with horrible, horrible, horrible stuff. Stupid, cheesy humor where Hux is supposedly the big, mean, evil commander of the Star Destroyer, and he's getting punked in one of the most stupid conversations I've ever heard in a Star Wars movie, where Poe is just, yeah, the Poe Hux back and forth was just cringeworthy. It was some of the worst humor I've ever seen in Star Wars. It probably is the worst humor I've ever seen in Star Wars. Well, that is up until the time that I then saw the trailer for Rise of Skywalker, where our stormtrooper boy says they fly now, because him being a stormtrooper has no idea that stormtroopers have jetpacks and have that technology. He, a stormtrooper, would know better than any of them that they have the capacity to fly, but he's like, they fly now? Yeah. So this is the type of humor that Disney thinks should be in Star Wars, and it's out of place. It doesn't belong in Star Wars. It's awful. Then we had the whole Rose Tico and the Stormtrooper dude, where they go off to some casino and we have to make a stand about how capitalism is evil and animal abuse is bad, and that whole section of the movie should have just been deleted because it was a whole waste of time. We could have spent time showing, Rey, maybe giving her some sort of backstory or training or something that would help develop her character to be something other than the Mary Sue that Rey is. And then there was the Mary Poppins thing with Princess Leia doing her float through space routine. I mean, there's just so much wrong with this movie. Let's use a light speed to ram a Star Destroyer, because that's not how light speed works. If it worked that way, then every time a ship would fly around, it would crash into planets and they would all blow up, because light speed actually passes through planets. It passes through matter. It would not actually destroy the ship it hit, because light speed passes through it. But I digress. Yes, Last Jedi, complete and total gutter trash. I'll be nice to it, and I will give it a 35 percentile, which is well below an F grade, no matter what teacher you have. Oh boy, Solo, a Star Wars movie. So this was pretty terrible. They didn't get Chewie right. They certainly didn't get Lando right, with his whole I'm in love with droids fetishes, which was just bizarre and out there. Again, trying to put political statements into Star Wars where they don't need to be. Then you have to have a woman taking up as much screen time as possible from Han Solo, telling Han Solo what to do, because Han Solo, the most manly of men in Star Wars, wasn't much of a man when he was a teenager, evidently. He was led around with a leash by a strong woman who basically dictated his life for him. What? This whole Han Solo movie was just wrong. It's Han Solo from a feminist agenda point of view, and nobody really wanted a Han Solo movie to begin with. I mean, you even brought in big stars like Woody Harrelson and the the movie still flopped and didn't even make money. The only Star Wars movie did not make money. But then again, it was the Star Wars movie directly after The Last Jedi. I don't think any Star Wars movie could have possibly made money having come out after The Last Jedi. But Rise of Skywalker will not make money, but it'll make money. So the thing with Rise of Skywalker is it's going to be very much like Captain Marvel. Disney is going to buy those tickets. We're going to hear about all these sold-out theaters with nobody in them, because Disney will not let this movie flop. If they have to burn $1 billion, they will. They're not going to let this movie flop, just so that they can try to stick it to us. Which is hilarious, because they're just going to lose more money trying to prop up their movie by buying their own failed movie tickets. But that's what we have to expect here with Rise of Skywalker. Anyway, back to Solo. What do I grade Solo at? I grade it at a 70%. And that's being very generous, because a 70% is typically the cutoff point where most teachers will go between an F to a D-. So in this circumstance, I'm giving Solo a D-. And I think that's very generous of me, because it was a pretty terrible movie. Alright, next on the list, Episode 2, The Attack of the Clones, the worst of the prequel. It was a movie that George Lucas himself predicted probably would not do very well, because of the whole love story esque part of it, and he was very much right. It was not as well received as many Star Wars movies before it. Attack of the Clones is... there's not much to like about that movie. It had a few moments. I mean, it had the opportunity to, I don't know, build up Hayden Christensen more than he was. So we went from being a kid in the first movie to being a teenager in the second movie. We skipped a whole lot of his life, of Anakin's life, and what we got to see about Anakin's life was this teen love affair with Padme. I mean, it's just... they could have... I don't know. It was too sappy. They could have spent more time building up Hayden Christensen's character. They could have spent more time building up Padme's character. So you got to remember that Hayden Christensen was the Mark Hamill for this prequel, and Padme, Princess Amidala, was the Leia for this prequel, and she was pretty close to being a Leia. She was pretty badass, right? The Phantom Menace kind of set her up to be a badass woman, but she kind of lost a bit of her badassery in this movie, and well, Hayden Christensen became a puppy dog. While Luke might have shown some slightly puppy dogness towards his sister, who he didn't know was a sister at the time, it was never... they never had time to pursue it because they were too busy dealing with stormtroopers and other things. And I think Episode 2 could have been too busy dealing with other things. I mean, they didn't have to pursue this romance that they did, and I think it was just a bad choice. We should have seen more of the training of Hayden Christensen. We should have seen more of some badass Amidala. I mean, just too much mushiness. Anyway, I give this movie a marginal score, a 72. This is Lucas's worst film. He gets a solid D for Attack of the Clones. Phantom Menace. There's so much to like in this movie, and then there's stuff to really dislike in this movie. Qui-Gon Jinn is my favorite character in all of the prequels. I love Qui-Gon. I thought he had incredible presence. He stole the show in this movie as far as I'm concerned. But the problem was that was pretty much it, right? He didn't continue through all of the movies, and when Qui-Gon is your star and Anakin's not really your star because Anakin's still a boy, and Qui-Gon kind of vanishes in the follow-on movies, then you lose that star power, if you will. The young Obi-Wan just didn't do it for me. Ian McGregor's Obi-Wan was so much better than the Obi-Wan in the prequels. I liked Qui-Gon, but I wasn't a big fan of Obi-Wan. I wasn't that big of a fan of Hayden Christensen either, to be honest. I'm not sure who I liked more, if I liked Obi-Wan or Hayden Christensen more. But either way, neither one of them was that big on my list. I mean, after Qui-Gon disappeared, I suppose maybe Padme was my next favorite character, and I didn't want to watch her in the second episode because of all that romance stuff going on. Yoda kind of stole the show here and there. Yoda and, dare I say, Mace Windu, who I really didn't... there were too many Jedis in some of these movies. Mace Windu was okay. Yoda really kicked ass. And yeah. So episode 1 had an amazing Qui-Gon Jinn. It had an awesome Darth Maul. So you had a great bad guy. You had a great good guy. You had a pretty cool, kid who had that whole... I could get into the speed racer thing where he's force sensitive and he's able to do these pod racing against non-humanoids, and normally humanoids have too slower reflexes to be able to do that. That was all cool. I dug that. But then Jar Jar Binks happened. Then the Gungans happened. And I kind of liked Jar Jar a little bit. I didn't hate Jar Jar as much as a lot of people hated Jar Jar, but at the same time, Jar Jar just didn't really fit Star Wars. Maybe if they changed the Gundams to be, I don't know, less silly? I think the Gundams were just too silly. If they would have just been... So they were kind of Native American-like. They had kind of older technology, if you will, but still high-tech technology. I liked how they kind of mixed the native vibe technology, the old school stuff, while still using, you know, Star Wars technology in it. That was cool. But the Gundams were just silly. And I don't like silly in Star Wars. Star Wars is serious. Star Wars is serious business. And that's another thing that the prequels suffered from is, while Darth Maul was pretty cool, he wasn't Darth Vader. But he was at least the closest thing the prequels had to it. Dooku certainly wasn't Vader. He wasn't Darth Maul either. Dooku was kind of meh. But, you know... And then you had the Emperor, or Palpatine, Chancellor. I liked him. I did like his transition in the sequels. I think he was one of the shining lights of the sequels. I liked how they kept setting him up to become the Emperor. I thought that part of it was pretty well done. But anyway, I'm supposed to be talking about Phantom Menace here. There's some high points in this movie. I liked a lot of things about this movie. I liked Padme. I liked Qui-Gon. I liked Darth Maul. I even liked the boy. But then you had Obi-Wan, who was a bit annoying. And then you had the Gundams, which kind of lowered the quality of the movie, if you will, because they were too silly. And that's ultimately what I'll say about Phantom Menace. I give it an 80%. Phantom Menace is like a C. It's a solid C. Star Wars Force Awakens. That's right. I have put one of these Disney movies ahead of the Phantom Menace and ahead of Attack of the Clones. Now I need to explain myself as to why I've done this. It's because when I left the theater after watching Force Awakens, I felt better about the movie I saw than when I left the movie, than whenever I left the movie after watching the prequels. So the prequels always felt like a letdown compared to the original trilogy for me. Every prequel movie felt like a letdown compared to the original trilogy. And that was a guaranteed feeling whenever I left the theater. It just wasn't as good. Well, the Star Wars A Force Awakens was Disney's first Star Wars movie. And they copied Star Wars A New Hope. J.J. Abrams copied. I mean, J.J. Abrams ripped off a Star Wars A New Hope. But I liked that he did that, because it made me feel like Star Wars was pressing the reset button and saying, yeah, we know you guys love the original trilogy, so we're going to show you we liked the original trilogy too. And here we go. We're gonna start off Disney Star Wars with kind of like they were paying homage to Star Wars by plagiarizing it, but putting a kind of a new spin on it for a new generation with new characters. And to me, that felt like a good way to bring in these new characters. I left the theater thinking, I can't wait to learn more about Rey. I can't wait to see her training. The Stormtrooper guy, he's going to be pretty cool. How often do Stormtroopers desert? can't wait to see more of him. You know, I had good feelings leaving the theater after Star Wars: The Force Awakens, but Disney never capitalized on those good feelings. In fact, Disney has so far from capitalized on those good feelings. The Disney movies, the Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, they don't even come close to the quality of the prequel movies. At this point, I dream of the prequel movies, even though I felt like the prequel movies just weren't the quality of the original trilogy. Disney's idea of Star Wars is give me Lucas back. I mean, yeah, I know I was one of the people that was just kind of like, you know, Lucas ain't doing it, but Lucas sure the hell does it way better than Disney does, let me tell you that. So, Star Wars: The Force Awakens is as high on the list because of how I felt when I left the theater. Maybe I should have it farther down on the list now that I know what Disney is, now that Disney has shed its wolf's clothing, if you will. But honestly, I did enjoy Star Wars: The Force Awakens more than the prequel movies. Now, with that being said, I'm going to confuse you all by the next slide. A prequel movie! But wait, you just said that the 80% you gave to... Or, sorry, I didn't grade Force Awakens. Force Awakens gets an 82%. 2 points over Phantom Menace. So here we are, Revenge of the Sith. Why do I have this slide, which means I must be grading this higher than The Force Awakens if it's a prequel movie? And that's because this movie, to me, is like wine. So wine has this interesting property about it that oftentimes as wine ages, it gets better. And so you know how you hear about a finely aged wine, you know, it gets better with time. That's this movie. Revenge of the Sith gets better with time. So at the time of leaving the theater, I thought Revenge of the Sith wasn't good enough. Revenge of the Sith told the story that needed to be told. And I think the Emperor portion of it was really good. But I didn't like the Vader portion of it. But it got you to being Vader. I still feel like Hayden Christensen's character, he just didn't... Anakin Skywalker didn't reach me. Of course, I had 3 movies with Luke Skywalker. Technically, I sort of only had 2 movies with Hayden Christensen. And I had 1 movie with the boy. So, in a way, Hayden Christensen had 1 movie less to work with. And it seemed like those 2 movies were spent doing things that weren't that important. You know, I obviously get that his love affair with Padme is part of what helped push him to the dark side, yada yada yada, and then the loss of his mother, and you know, all these final things that were needed to push him over. And then his falling out with Obi-Wan. But I just... the Hayden Christensen to Darth Vader transition just didn't do it for me. Like the Chancellor to Emperor transition. I liked the Emperor. But Hayden Christensen wasn't a Darth Vader for me. So, with each year that goes by, I look back at Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, and I like it more. And I like it more, I guess, because the more times I see it, the more I realize that it was a story I didn't really want to see. But it had to be told. And it was told. It does add up. 2 plus 2 equals 4. We did make it to Darth Vader. It just wasn't quite sure I liked the transition. I thought the transition could have been better. But ultimately it's the best prequel, and it's the one that seems to get better with time. So that's why it's where it's at. I'm actually giving it an 86%, which I think at 86% is like a solid B. So yeah, it's the best prequel, and it's a solid B at 86%. Then there's Rogue One, a Star Wars story. This is the weird I Got Lucky Disney movie. I don't know. Did Darth Kennedy... Was it because it wasn't a trilogy? Did Darth Kennedy not stick her nose into this movie as much as she has the other ones? Rogue One didn't feel like it was complete political nonsense. Rogue One, a Star Wars story, it felt like good Star Wars. It wasn't great Star Wars, but it was good Star Wars. And so it's definitely the best Disney Star Wars movie, bar none. There's no doubt that Rogue One is the best movie that Disney has put out in the Star Wars genre. The funny thing about this is I can't really name the characters. I don't know if that's because it's, just a standalone movie. It's not a trilogy. These characters. I remember the movie. I know how the movie goes. I can close my eyes and I can basically watch the movie in my mind. So I know how it plays out. But I can't name these characters on the screen. I know that the blind guy is freaking cool as hell, but I don't know what his name is. I thought the girl did a great job in the movie, but I don't know her name. I think the white guy in the center is named Cassian, maybe? That something's coming to my name to me that's his name, but I'm not even sure of that. But I do know that I enjoyed this movie. I went to the theater and I was impressed with this movie, and I thought, hey, and this was after A Force Awakens, so I thought after seeing a Rogue One that Disney was on the ball. They were going to give us good Disney stuff. But it turns out that Rogue One was Disney getting lucky. It wasn't going to really translate to what Disney was really going to give us. So while I did really enjoy Rogue One, I'm going to give it about an 88%. Which is probably a solid B+. I certainly can't give it an A if I can't remember the names of the characters. But I think a B plus, 88% is a pretty fair spot to grade this movie because I did enjoy it. In fact, I enjoyed it more than any of the prequels. I definitely enjoyed it the most out of any of the Disney movies. It was a fun movie. But it most definitely was not Return of the Jedi. So Return of the Jedi is just like a whole quality bar above Rogue One. It's just big transition there. Return of the Jedi is A material. It doesn't get much better than Return of the. It doesn't get much. I can speak really. Return of the Jedi. You have to really nitpick to find things that you might not like about Return of the Jedi, and for some, it's the Ewoks. But at the same time, I really like the Ewoks. And I know the Ewoks were probably put in to sell toys. I thought Wicket was cute, man. I had dreams of me being Wicket and hugging up with Princess Leia. But okay, so we won't talk about that. But getting a gum from Princess Leia and being Wicket, just yeah, never mind. There's the C-3PO time with the Ewoks, where C-3PO gets to be their god, and we got that whole opportunity for C-3PO to translate a language. C-3PO was this translator droid, right? Who he never really did a whole lot of translating, but he got his opportunity to kind of shine in that movie, and so. In my opinion, Return of the Jedi was probably the opportunity for C-3PO to put in his best role. And I liked the droids. I love R2 and I love C-3PO. Star Wars is not Star Wars without R2 and C-3PO. But R2, he always stole the show. R2 was, he was the droid, man. C-3PO always felt like R2's sidekick. But Return of the Jedi gave C-3PO a chance to kind of stand out on his own. So I appreciated that about Return of the Jedi and the Ewoks. And Chewie looked like he was having fun with the Ewoks. Chewie looked like he was in his element with these little fur balls, and he was having a good time kicking some stormtrooper butt. So even the worst part of the Return of the Jedi, the Ewoks, still I can't say much bad about it. Ewoks were 1,000 times better than the Gundams. I call the Gundams silly. Ewoks, I suppose if I use my own logic, the Ewoks are a little silly. But are they? I mean, they're just mini Chewbacca's that wore clothing. How silly really were they? I thought they fit. I really didn't get the real silly vibe off of the Ewoks like I did with the Gundams. And because of that, I'm only going to mark Return of the Jedi down 3 points from 100. So Return of the Jedi is a solid 97%. Complete A, no doubt about it. Great movie. Would watch it 10,000 times again. Have watched it 10,000 times already. Will continue to always watch Return of the Jedi if I'm ever bored. I love this movie. This movie's a great movie. And the number 2 of the 11 movies we've gone through is Star Wars A New Hope. The very first one with the real Obi-Wan, who was freaking awesome. Greatest Jedi ever. Well, my particular favorite Jedi. I mean, Yoda's done some amazing things in the prequels and has kicked some real butt in the prequels. Yoda is fun. And Luke, I grew up idolizing him. He's my hero. But Obi-Wan, he was that Jedi Master that put Luke on the journey. He was the Jedi Master that showed me what being a Jedi was, He got struck down by Vader. He let himself get struck down by Vader, knowing that he would come back more powerful and he'd be able to help Luke. And yeah, I loved Star Wars. Star Wars is just Tarkin holding Vader's leash. This commander, this governor, so powerful and strong, and that he was able to have Vader as kind of like a peer. So Vader took no lip from anyone. He killed people with his force choke, but Tarkin was there and was able to hold Vader's leash, as Princess Leia said. Tarkin was a powerful commander, unlike Hux. Hux is a joke. Vader, ultimate evil, ultimate bad guy. No bad guy has ever been as bad as Vader is. Vader is just, you see him on the screen and your eyes do not leave the screen. He's imposing. He strikes fear. He is the epitome of a bad guy. Darth Maul came close. The Emperor's pretty evil, but ultimately Vader is the #1 bad guy in Star Wars. There's no doubt about it, and he's probably the #1 bad guy of all time. I don't think that there's a bad guy that's badder than Vader. Vader is the #1 bad guy of all time. And that's what makes the original trilogy so good, is because the bad guys were so good. The bad guys were believable. And they were bad, and they were imposing, and they really set the tone that this rebellion was important. This rebellion was the last desperate hurrah against an evil force of unimaginable power. Yeah, Star Wars. Amazing movie. Nearly perfect. I'm going to give it a 99%, and I'm marking it down 1 percentage point from 100, purely so that I could set it apart from the #1 Star Wars movie of all time. Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. It's hard to get cooler than Star Wars. It's hard to have a movie so good and then follow up with a movie that's better. That's nigh impossible. Sequels are almost always worse than the original movies. But The Empire Strikes Back, it did it. It surpassed the movie that was unsurpassable. I mean, how cool was the ice planet of Hoth with the walkers, the AT-ATs, the AT-ATs of General Veers, bringing Vader's strike force into the rebel base. the whole Hoth scene was just amazing. The rebel uniforms always struck me as being so real. I always thought of the Hoth rebel uniforms as being the best uniforms in all of Star Wars. And of course I love the old school stormtroopers and the old school Star Destroyers. Sometimes I think that the prequel attempted to change too much. And that's part of, I guess, what I liked about The Force Awakens was going back and seeing some of the original stuff being reused. Still remember when Han Solo had to go out to find Luke to rescue him, slicing open that tauntaun with Luke's lightsaber and sticking Luke inside of the tauntaun. How realistic it looked. I mean, I've gutted a lot of deer. I know exactly what that smells like when you slice open the guts on an animal. And how warm it is too. And the thinking of Solo to be so on the ball to understand that survival tactic and to use it. And how they made me feel when that poor tauntaun got slit open. I felt for the tauntaun. But I also understood that it meant saving Luke. And, you know, it was a no-brainer. You had to save Luke. I mean, Empire Strikes Back, just wow. There's no better way to explain Empire Strikes Back than wow. It is the pinnacle of all Star Wars movies. I don't know what else to say. If only we could get movies the quality of the original trilogy again. So, I think the original trilogy really... the casting was amazing. The I don't know, maybe you call it luck, being able to put together a Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, and Mark Hamill together. They were so good together. And then there's Chewie, who works so well with Han, and R2, who works so well with Luke, and C-3PO, who works so well with R2. I mean, and then Vader, the most amazing bad guy. The cast of the original trilogy, just... it's so many levels above all the rest of the Star Wars movies. The casting was just far superior. Disney's characters, Rey, I would have liked to have liked her, but I can't like her because there's nothing to like about her. She's just perfect. I mean, she went through none of the trials and tribulations of Luke. She didn't have to be stuck into a tauntaun by Han Solo and sleep in the guts of a tauntaun. She didn't have to have her hand cut off by Darth Vader. She didn't have to go through the humbling experience of being tricked by Jedi Master Yoda in the swamps of Dagobah. She just was, you know? the Stormtrooper guy, John Boyega's character, he could have been really cool, but there was no development of his character. None. I mean, when he was on the screen, it felt like a waste of time. And there's, Kelly Marie Tran, who, I'm sorry, her character was a complete waste of time. There was nothing interesting about her character. It seemed like it got put in just so that they could check off a box to say, yes, we have Asian female character, check. Half the time John Boyega felt like African American character, check. Most of Disney movies feel like we're just checking off checks on a checkbox to make sure we have a female representative, a black representative, an Asian representative, a this representative, a that representative. It's too representative. It's not real. Life isn't like that. Life is out of proportion. Sometimes you walk into a restaurant and there's 25 more guys than there are girls. Sometimes you walk in a restaurant and there's 24 more girls than there are guys. Of course, that depends on which restaurant you're walking into. Are you going into a sushi bar or are you going into a steakhouse? I mean, life is not equal. But yet we're trying to make these silly movies with all these checkboxes. That's what Disney feels like, is Disney checkboxes. That they've lost touch with what makes a great movie. I don't know as if there'll ever be Star Wars movies that will ever come close to rivaling the original trilogy, because I don't know if there's ever gonna be a Han Solo, or a Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, and Carrie Fisher trio on the screen that works so well together. If I just think about movies in general, it's hard to even... Well... Maverick and Goose, they really worked well together. And, yeah, Top Gun, the chemistry in Top Gun of the cast was really good. That's the type of chemistry I'm talking about. So, the Empire Strikes Back, Star Wars: A New Hope, Return of the Jedi just have this cast chemistry that's so good. So, yeah, Top Gun had a lot of cool fighter scenes and stuff like that, but what really made Top Gun great was all of those amazing characters. And we're not just talking Tom Cruise and Goose, which I don't even remember what actor played him, to be honest, but you had the Iceman, Val Kilmer, and Slider, and all those other guys who put in amazing performances as well, and they were all so real, and you got to learn about each one of them a little bit, and it fit together like a jigsaw puzzle, and it felt real. The new Disney movies, they don't fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. They just don't. The cast just doesn't feel right. The cast feels forced. But anyway, I'm going on in circles at this point. The point of this video is basically to summarize the best Star Wars movies from worst to best, and I've done that. Just to recap, number 11 was Rise of the Skywalker. Number 10 The Last Jedi, number 9, Solo, number 8, Attack of the Clones, number 7, Phantom Menace, number 6, A Force Awakens, number 5, Revenge of the Sith, number 4, Rogue One, number 3, Return of the Jedi, number 2, Star Wars A New Hope, number 1, Empire Strikes Back. And before I end this video, I do want to actually touch on The Mandalorian. If The Mandalorian was a movie, it would fit between Return of the Jedi and Rogue One. In fact, if I had to score it on my same grading scale that I'm giving these movies, I would give it a 93%. So it would be on the low end of the 90 percentile, below Return of the Jedi. So Return of the Jedi is a solid A. The Mandalorian to me is a solid A-. It's still in the A bracket, but it's definitely better than the B movie that Rogue One was. So, well, excuse me, B+ movie for Rogue One. But Mandalorian is an A- as far as I'm concerned. And so that does give me some spark of hope for Disney Star Wars. That maybe Disney Star Wars on TV might be something that will continue the Star Wars legacy moving forward. But then, I don't know. So, I think the number one problem with Disney Star Wars is Darth Kennedy. Until that we can do something about Darth Kennedy, I think Star Wars is just, it's destined to fail. As long as Darth Kennedy is running things, we are going to get bad movies that are focusing on political messaging instead of giving us a good movie for good movie's sake. So I feel like Jon Favreau and Jon Favreau and the Clone Wars guy. Dave Filoni. Sorry, I had to go look that up. It was going to drive me nuts. I was drawing a blank. So, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni have done an amazing job on the Mandalorian. And I think the reason that is because I believe those two have enough clout within LucasArts that they can basically keep Darth Kennedy at arm's length. I think that Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau have enough political clout within the world of LucasArts that they can basically ignore Darth Kennedy. And I think she realizes they have enough clout that she keeps her hands off of what they're doing. So I think it's kind of like Filoni's kind of like, he was the other possible person that Lucas could have left the keys to. Filoni and Kennedy were both kind of like Lucas's children. You had the daughter and the son, and it could have just as easily have been handed off to Filoni instead of Kennedy. And I think George wishes he probably handed the keys off to Filoni instead of Kennedy at this point. In fact, I think every Star Wars fan in the world wishes that the keys would have been handed off to Dave Filoni instead of Darth Kennedy. But maybe Iger will see fit to bring us the most wonderful Christmas present we could get this year. And that is Darth Kennedy's head on a platter and either Dave Filoni or Jon Favreau as the next CEO of LucasArts. That's my wish for Christmas. That's my Christmas present that I would love to get, is to get Darth Kennedy's head on a platter. Disney, if you're watching, that's all I ask for Christmas is Darth Kennedy's head on a platter. Anyway, I am James Johnson, aka Sulfurblade. This is my content. Hopefully you're enjoying it. If so, please leave a like and subscribe. And until the next time, all, peace.